Welcome to Game On, Record Sports Rapid Fire Hot Takes podcast. My name is Fraser Clarke, and as those of you watching will be able to see, Graham Young has been dropped to the bench and Gavin Berry is back in our starting lineup. Gav, thanks for joining me after a week off. Are you ready and raring for what lies ahead?
Yes, batteries recharged, Fraser, but I'm not sure I'll be as good as Graham.
No, well, I mean, if you're not, that's not a problem. We'll just drop you to the bench next week and we can bring Graham back in.
I think that'll quite possibly happen, but we'll see. I'll give it a bash.
Try and impress the gaffer over the next half an hour or so. We've got just 120 seconds to debate this week's big issues from across the world of sport, and seeing as it's against the clock, there's no time for any rambling, which is normally an issue for all of us here at Record Sport. So without further ado, we will kick things right off and we will start by talking about Rangers. And the big story from Glasgow this week, or certainly from the south side, is Kevin Thelwell the right man for the Rangers sporting director role? Gavin, you have been all over this. Talk to me about Kevin Thelwell.
Well, I think, first of all, Rangers and Rangers fans have to be realistic about who they can attract. That goes for every position right now. But what they definitely do need are people in these key leadership roles who basically know what they're doing, Fraser, or can do that job. Can do the job, are qualified to do the job. And I think on paper, Kevin Thelwell, his Premier League experience, Wolves, Everton, and even his stint in America, I think he probably, looking at his CV, looks to be as good as they could probably have got at this stage. But I mean, there's always excitement around, these appointments and CVs. I know I'm saying on paper, the same was said of Ross Wilson when Rangers got him. He was regarded as a bit of a coup, having worked down at Southampton, and by the end they're holding up banners chasing the guy out of the place. So the proof will be in the pudding, but I certainly think it looks to be as good as you could possibly have hoped for.
I was reading your article, sort of going through his signings, and one of the things that maybe struck me, that I don't know if it'd be a warning sign as such, but two of the bigger hit signings, Dwight McNeil and James Tarkowski, were kind of already known to Sean Dyche. Was there any element that you, when you were writing that article, that either, I guess, you'd look at and think, right, that would give me hope if I was a Rangers fan, or that would be a warning sign to me?
No, I think actually what would give me most hope is the fact that he has worked at a club where there has been turbulence. Because, if you were to go and take someone from a Premier League position in England, quite often they're coming from clubs where there's millions to spend and, you can afford to make mistakes. Whereas at Everton, because of the way the ownership was at that time, he was firefighting a lot of the time. And, I think that experience will stand him in really good stead for the Rangers job, because as we know, the way Rangers have been in recent years, although they're hoping that will change under the new ownership, but there's been turmoil.
Yeah.
And he's been able to deal with that. Even at Wolves, he had Jorge Mendes, a super agent in the back, who an unhealthy probably influence. But Fraser, also at Rangers this week, the silence was broken on the takeover months after we broke the story. But the clock is ticking. I think, the fixtures will be out shortly. The Champions League draw will be made. Celtic are a point away from winning 4 in a row. Do you think it's all happening too late, or can Rangers mount a serious challenge next season? Can they get their house in order?
I understand. I think it was Keith was talking about it being too late for them for next season. I understand that. I'm going to say no, just on the basis of how quickly things can change if you make the right appointments in football. And you only have to look at Ange Posthumus for that. Yeah. His appointment transformed the Scottish football landscape when he came in. Now, Rangers have to nail the managerial appointment. Yes. They have to really nail the transfer window. They probably need pretty major surgery on the club's squad. I think everyone is in agreement with that after years of underachievement. But with the right appointment, with the right signings, there's no reason why they can't turn things around. And if you think about how quickly it changed for Celtic in the season that they didn't win the league, they went from being dominant, comfortable, controlled to being miles off the pace. I'm not saying that will happen to them. This Celtic side are undoubtedly very good. We'll talk about them more later. But they're not levels above, and Rangers have shown that in the old firms.
Well, you're saying Ange Posthumus. I actually think that you're right, Ange Posthumus, but I think Celtic in general are a good example, because Wim Jansen did it one summer to stop Rangers winning 10 in a row. Martin O'Neill came in. Rangers had finished 21 points ahead of Celtic the previous season. He comes in one summer. You're right. If you get the right manager and recruitment, that is obviously the key, where Rangers have performed poorly. But it can change around in one summer. But the clock is ticking. They need to start making these key appointments. Wim Jansen did arrive very late in the summer. This season he was appointed by Celtic. I think Martin O'Neill as well was maybe appointed on June the 1st. So not a lot of time, but I think, and as you say, Rangers this season have shown that they can beat Celtic, albeit we have to, caveat that with the fact that Celtic had the league pretty much wrapped up in each of the 2 times that they lost. But it's beating the other teams and getting that consistency. It shouldn't be too difficult, to do that when you have a budget that is so much bigger than the others.
That's the big thing. And if Rangers had gone into every game with Celtic and been beaten 4-0, 5-0 or 3-0 comfortably, something like that, then you'd say that's a huge job. You actually go, on paper, Rangers have been competing with Celtic. They've just been throwing away daft points. The right manager, they don't throw away those points. Yeah. Feels like we've spoken a wee bit about Celtic, so shall we just move on to them? This got a little bit of ire from Robbie Fowler, no less, during the week.
Saw that.
Is Celtic's treble going to be the most underwhelming of all time? That's a silly question. Can a treble ever be underwhelming?
That's what I was just going to say to you. Just read that question back. Just read it back. Is the treble going to be underwhelming? And Callum McGregor says, we'll become desensitised to it. And he's right. And that is the problem. Celtic have become, do you know what? It probably is a bit boring, but that's not Celtic's fault. I don't, that should not be used as something to criticise them with. In fact, it should be quite the opposite. They have just, they've been so good. Celtic managers are judged on trebles now. When Brendan Rodgers left first time around, Celtic managers were then being judged on trebles. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's where we're at. They're victims of their own success. Of course, it's boring because nobody, fans of any sport don't like to see one team, one person dominating. It does become boring. Look, there was footage last week on social media, I think, of Celtic fans leaving at half-time at Hampden of the Scottish Cup semi-final against St Johnstone. So, they will be getting, bored. You can see that fans, leave games early, and that leads to some bickering. But I think it's understandable. If you're going every week and it is routine, that's just the nature of it.
And it's that daft thing in football. See winning a game 3-0 and you score all 3 goals in the first half. That's a nice feeling. See winning a game 2-1 and scoring with the last kick of the ball. Mm-hmm. That's an unbelievable feeling. So if Celtic had pipped Rangers to the title by 1 point on like a final day decider, this wouldn't feel underwhelming at all. That would feel incredible. But actually what they've done is more impressive than that. And I think you nailed it with the victims of their own success thing. That's exactly the words I had down for it. Yeah. And it's down to how weak everyone else has been. Yeah. It's not Celtic's fault. It's not underwhelming that they're just better than everybody. No. It's because the whole league hasn't been able to lay a glove on them for the most part. Yeah. That's the big issue.
And you're right about teams, wanting to win, 2-1. You've seen it with clubs actually over the years when they've dropped out of the Premiership. Maybe like Hibs, for example, back in the Alan McLeish days. See when they went into the Championship and it was tighter, full houses, competition. That's what they want. You're going for something, and there's a bit of a challenge there. Talk about Hibs, or ended up by talking about Hibs there, but what about Hearts? Knocked out of the Scottish Cup semi-final by Aberdeen. Heartache, finished with 9 men, and the club used that, or John Beaton's decision to issue a second yellow card to Cammy Devlin. Aberdeen then go on to score. What did you make of their statement? Not just blaming, sort of pointing the finger at John Beaton for defeat, but even generally talking about decisions throughout the season and how they've almost been victimised.
It felt desperate, didn't it? And it felt like deflection.
Deflection. That was the word. That's the word that's been sort of used this week, isn't it?
And I was reading Ryan Stevenson's column on it, and I think he basically said the same. So there's somebody who's got, hearts at heart, if you sort of pardon the pun there, but he's got hearts at heart, and he's saying, look, this is deflection. Let's be honest. And I thought Neil Critchley, to a degree, got a bit of unfair criticism on the basis that when he came in, they looked destined for the drop. And now they're in no relegation danger. That's the minimum expected of Hearts. Like, this season has been very, very disappointing. Bottom 6 finish, knocked out of the Scottish Cup in the fashion that they were. And I think it's not even the going down to 10 men. Neil Critchley took a lot of heat for the 2 subs, the bringing on centre-halves, the taking off strikers that basically went, right, we're going to try and defend for our lives and either get it to penalties or just nick a chance. Aberdeen were there for the taking. Rangers showed that playing against them with 10 men just a week earlier. That Aberdeen team, although their form actually is decent at the moment, are still fragile, or they certainly still look fragile. I think that's the disappointment. And this, and throughout the season, felt like deflection. If you're pointing at, like, your Hearts, you finished 7th in the league, you can't blame the referee for that. That's just, it's not good enough.
Yeah, and these statements, it's just playing to the gallery, isn't it? It's just pandering to the fans. It's what they want to hear. Although I think, to be honest, a lot of them did see through it.
It's the easy person to blame as well, isn't it? And you'll see, I'm thinking about games when I was a kid. I'd maybe leave and think, oh, the ref was rubbish. He cost us today. But then you look at it as an adult and you're like, no, we didn't defend well enough. We've not been good enough at this. We've not been good enough at that. It's such an easy target. And look, I'm not John Beaton's biggest fan. I think this was harsh. And I think it was almost uncalled for, because you look at those two major decisions, I think he got them spot on.
Actually,
I don't think there was an issue with either of them. And I watched an Aberdeen fan had put together like clips of all of Cammy Devlin's fouls throughout the game.
I saw that. And
I thought, yeah, if you're picking up 2 bookings for that, I don't think you can have any real complaints. And that's the sort of player he is.
It just looked like a tired challenge. So, I mean, that was obviously a close game at Hampden. Aberdeen edging that one in extra time, but there was nothing close about the game 24 hours later. The second semi-final, Celtic swatting St Johnstone aside. Adam Idah on the scoreline after about a week of controversy, captured on social media, appearing to be sick, or it was being sick out of a taxi. We don't know why. It could have been a bug, it could have been anything, but it looked as if he'd maybe had one too many and had been sick in the taxi. Brendan Rodgers blamed, modern day and social media and footballers not been allowed to live normal lives. There's definitely an argument to that, but was he right to defend his striker?
I think he had to defend him publicly.
Yeah.
I think what Brendan Rodgers has said behind closed doors is going to be very, very different. I think it's maybe also worth looking at Adam Idah more generally in terms of, this is still a young guy coming up to play for his boyhood club, coming from Norwich City where the pressure is nothing like Celtic.
Yeah.
He will be so determined to make a success of himself. Huge price tag on his head, huge pressure in a different country. And he's struggled this season. There's no two ways about it. And I think Brendan Rodgers knows if he came out and hammered him, see if Maeda does that after the season he's got and Brendan Rodgers makes a wee flippant comment about it or just kind of laughs it off, that's fine. Yeah. Because of the season he does had, he can't really afford it. And it's almost like he just needs a reminder. Yeah. You might get away with this at Norwich, seeing the Glasgow Goldfish Bowl. Your every single move, somebody's watching. Yeah, and we can't deny, I mean, whatever Brendan Rodgers says, and you're right, he may be right about people just want a piece of, footballers when they're out. But it's not a good look. It's not a good. It actually took me back to Ronnie Dyler. Used to say to be a professional footballer, you have to be a 24-hour athlete. When I watched that clip, and that quote ended up coming back to haunt him a bit when Scott Brown, I don't know if you remember, was outside the Chippy. Yeah, he was pictured slumped in a street in Edinburgh outside the Chippy, and then that quote was brought back up, and he's having to try and defend Scott Brown. It was, you said to be a professional, you have to be a 24-hour athlete. That was what came back to my mind as soon as I saw the Adam Idah video and listened to the Brendan Rodgers comments. So I think you're right. I think behind closed doors he will be having a word with him and saying, look, be careful in future, And it's that thing as well where, and we don't want to get over dramatic about it, you're a Celtic player out presumably in Glasgow, not in a great state. Like, you're lucky that all that happened was somebody took a video of you. Somebody could have, I remember years ago, Kyle Hutton and Cal Naismith being kidnapped and driven around Edinburgh. I know it sounds ridiculous and over the top, but you just can't really get yourself into that situation as an Old Firm player. Yeah. Well, we move on and we have spoken about Hearts. We will speak about Hibs and everything is going magnificently well there. Yeah. Should David Gray win Manager of the Year? No. Well, no. That's fine. We can move on. Sorry, I say no, but what I was going to say is we've had years of saying that, making the same point here. The timing of these votes makes it very difficult because you don't know, where they're going to end up. And what if Hibs finished fifth with no trophy? That's not money. He's done brilliantly to turn it around. Let's not forget he was in charge of the horrendous start, but he has done brilliant to turn it around. If they finish third, remarkable. But I still think even third alone without any trophies, I'm not sure it would be enough for him to win Manager of the Year. As I say, in terms of who should be Manager of the Year, if Jimmy Tilleen was to finish third and win the Scottish Cup, then you would say he'd be in with a shout. Celtic are red hot favourites to win the treble. If they do that, surely Brendan Rodgers has to do it when you take into account what he did in Europe as well. So I think it's going to be, it would have to be Brendan Rodgers. David Gray, brilliant job, but I think it's not enough. Yeah, I agree. I think, although some of their players should have been in the running for the Player of the Year,
Probably, as Tam McManus says in his daily record column today, astonishing.
Yeah, no, that's another point. But yeah, I think I agree with you on the basis that there needs to be, if not silverware, a cup final appearance. And I know that they're unfortunate. Their only defeat, I think, in 20 has been that Scottish Cup loss to Celtic.
Yeah.
If they get to the cup final, and even if they lose it, but they finish third in the league, you go, right, that's been an outstanding season. It probably will go down as an outstanding season purely because of the way David Gray's turned it around. And I think the easiest thing in the world, says he who's never been a football manager, the easiest thing in the world is to go into a club, start really well, and then it tails off because your ideas are fresh, players are trying to impress you. To go in, start poorly, stick by your principles, and then put together this form at the end of the season. Reverse Jimmy Tilleen, if you will. I think that's phenomenal. I think that speaks so much about him. In terms of manager of the year, again, this is because we've normalised getting a treble, isn't it? And any other season in history, if a Celtic manager or Rangers manager wins a treble, the manager of the year crown is theirs. A word as well, just dropping into the championship. If John McGlynn wins it with Falkirk, I think he should be up there too. Okay. Although that's getting a bit shaky, according to my Bairn supporting pals. They're getting a wee bit nervous. We will now move on to talk about Rangers' next manager. That's not going to be David Gray. Well, maybe it could be. Maybe we should throw that name out there. Maybe. But we are wondering about wildcard Rangers' next manager suggestions, and someone whose name has just begun to pop up in the last couple of hours before we started this podcast is Lee Carsley. Gav, talk to me about Lee Carsley.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking that I don't know if his name's popped up. I mentioned it to you as a possible. Has anybody else mentioned it? Possibly. Maybe it's not as left field then if you've read it elsewhere. No, I was just thinking Kevin Thelwell, Everton connections, Sean Dyche would be the obvious one. Out of work, he was he has been linked with the job anyway. But just when you were looking at the Everton connection, I thought, what about Lee Carsley? Possibly England under-21 manager. He obviously that brief spell as caretaker after Gareth Southgate left. I just wondered whether he would maybe tick a few more boxes. Sean Dyche, I don't think Sean Dyche would be the worst. I think a lot of fans, but are just maybe not sure. It's always this kind of long ball tactics that he's labelled with, a bit of a long ball merchant. Lee Carsley's probably the complete opposite. It's someone who seems to be a modern day thinker, good style of play, good record at England under-21s. Obviously, was Everton under-21 manager. I was even looking there just at his contract situation. It said before he got that caretaker stint, he was only on 300 grand a year at the FA. They bumped him up slightly when he got that.
Only 300 grand? That's like
only. Well, when you consider Philip Clement was on about reportedly 2.5 million, it's a big saving. I think it could be. I don't think it would be. It's the most ridiculous shout in the world, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting one, especially given his work with young players. If Rangers are going down more of a sort of sporting director model, that could be an appealing one. Another one that just popped up, and it was actually our colleague and podcasting pal Graham Young who'd thrown his name in, was Kim Hellberg, who is the manager at Hammarby in Sweden. Now, not somebody I knew a great deal about until I read Graham's article. Please go online to the website and read it if you want to know a wee bit more about him. And I just wonder as well, a guy with no real playing career of note, limited managerial experience, I think 55 games or so. By all accounts, he's done a phenomenal job out there. Is that something that could work at Rangers, taking that wild card? And the one that springs into my mind in terms of a wild card type was Andre Villas-Boas. When he first sort of came to the fore, it feels like a gamble. Is it a gamble you could see them taking?
No.
Excellent.
Sorry, I was saved by the whistle there. In fact, Jimmy Tilleen was actually... Was he mentioned for the Rangers job early in the season? Possibly. Or he was certainly used as an example of what could be achieved. And a bit of a stick to beat Philip Clement with when he, of course, that was before it went wrong for Jimmy Tilleen. They went on a downward spiral. They've kind of plateaued a wee bit. Scottish Cup final appearance, still in the hunt for third. Does he need the Scottish Cup win, do you think, for his first season at Pittodrie to be a success?
Now, after what I said about David Gray, the fact that if he got to a cup final, his season would be a success, can't really say that Jimmy Tilleen's wouldn't.
No.
Now, based on that, it's funny.
Even if you're losing to this Celtic team?
I had in my head that Aberdeen's form was a lot worse than it is. And I think it's because they're not always the most convincing. Like the Rangers result is the one that it sticks in my mind. If you're throwing away a 2-goal lead against 10 men against a Rangers team who have particularly struggled away from home, like that's just a dreadful result if you're Aberdeen. So I looked into it on the way in today, and that's, I think, one defeat in 10 matches that they've had. That was against Celtic. They could win the Scottish Cup. Okay, it hasn't felt fully convincing, but is he a victim of his own success? And actually, has he just had David Gray's season in reverse?
In reverse, yeah.
In which case, why are we not talking about him? Now, if David Gray had started the season with 14 wins in 15 games, and then had this, would we still be talking about him as a manager
Yeah.
of the year? And I think we maybe would.
Yeah, but again, it comes back to the timing and not knowing that race for third. There's a big difference between finishing third or finishing fifth. Now, Aberdeen, Hibs, Dundee United could all sort of trade places. But if you were to say to me now that Jimmy Tulane got third, I think best of the rest is really what you're hoping for if you're a non-Old Firm manager, and then to get to the cup final. And if you lose to this Celtic team, I think you'd have to say they finished 7th last season. Let's not forget. So it is progress. I mean, even if finished 5th, it's still progress. But you would hope, he'll be hoping a third place finish. I think that would have to be success, regardless of what happened in the final. If he could put the icing on the cake by lifting that trophy, and they've gone far too long, Aberdeen, without winning the Scottish Cup.
Spent a good amount of money as well, so I think next season becomes big for him. I think he came in, there was so much excitement in that brilliant start. They backed him. Now they will be expecting third place. I would think next season, maybe not as a minimum, but certainly to be very, very close to it. And anything less than third next season, I think would be a disappointment.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with that. Now, next up, what have we got, Fraser?
Well, that was one manager. Let's talk about a manager who will definitely be leaving his club at the end of the season. And where now for Ange Posthumus with him set to leave Spurs? We were talking about this in the chat a few days ago, but where do you see Ange's future? Because I have a country in mind.
Oh, do you? Well, I was going to say Greece. Is it Greece?
No, Germany.
Oh, Germany. Right,
I can see Ange in Germany, the fan culture, the style of play.
Good shout. Well, I was trying to think, abroad. I thought, well, maybe he'll probably get another crack. I mean, he landed a very big job in the English Premier League in terms of going straight from the Scottish Premiership. There's not many managers, even Brendan Rodgers, after all his success. I mean, he went to Leicester City, Alec McLeish and Martin Neal back in the day, going to Villa to get the Tottenham job, relatively big job. I think he'll get another crack, probably England, if he wants. I see he was linked with the Leeds job this week if Daniel Farke was to go. So maybe you could see that. I was then thinking abroad. I thought, well, Greece, maybe for personal reasons, obvious reasons, he would maybe want to go back there. Key Athens with his team growing up, I think, and Liverpool. So maybe Greece, but Germany, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, international. I mean, he's 59. He has had a go at the international job. Australia, would he go back there? Probably not. I don't know if international football will be for him right now anyway. I think another crack at a Leeds type level club in the Premier League or going abroad. I was thinking Athens. But Germany, not a bad shout.
Germany's I just think the fan culture and the style of play would buy right into him. Also, if not Germany, Turkey. It just feels like Turkey has always been the place that managers maybe out of work from the English Premier League who are they've still got good reputations, they've still big enough names, just maybe not flavour of the month in England. Turkey, maybe it could, again, you've got crazy atmospheres, you've got really, really passionate fans, and it feels like that's the thing, maybe the kind of touristy element of the English Premier League. It's just something that they never got him and he never really got them. And you see it felt like he was permanently taking snipes at Tottenham fans, and I think he saw at Celtic a fan base that bought into him and that reflected his passion. I think that's what he'll be looking for in his next move.
Great. Let's finish off, Fraser, with snooker, and you are our expert, Record Sports snooker expert. So we've got the Crucible. Well, I'm saying expert. Did you not tip Mark Selby, who's now out?
Yes, and I tipped Hearts to go through last week in the Scottish Cup as well. So, and I've tipped Falkirk to win the league. So, Bairns fans.
Okay, so you're not an expert in anything. Okay,
no.
Right. Let's finish off with the snooker, and you're going to tell us, is Xiao Jingtong, the boy wonder from the Far East, is he the favourite?
I want him to win it, so I can't tip him to do anything because that would just jinx him. I think now that we've lost Mark Selby, who's my tip, we've lost Kyron as the reigning champion, we've lost Barry Hawkins, we've lost Neil Robertson, Mark Allen is in a spot of bother as we record this, or certainly he was when we came in. I think Xiao Jingtong is probably second favourite behind Judd, and Judd Trump played so well the other night in his opening round victory. Judd Trump's got Sean Murphy next. Sean Murphy, probably behind Jingtong and behind Trump, was the best performer of the opening round. Maybe Ronnie's second session was obviously incredible as well, but first session he was a bit slack, and with it being Ronnie, you never quite know what you're going to get from him. I would have Xiao Jingtong as second favourite for it, but he's somebody who's playing with no pressure, and I think as it goes on, Judd Trump, he's built his season around this. He is the world number one. all the pressure is on his shoulders.
Not even pressure on the youngster because of the circumstances coming back when he's been banned from the sport because of the betting offences. You don't think that brings its own pressure? No?
No, I don't think so, because this is a free hit. He's playing as an amateur. I mean, this is, okay, he would never be on the amateur tour if it wasn't for serving a 20-month ban. This is almost a bonus getting there. He's played 4 qualifiers to get to this stage. He's then put in a phenomenal performance against last year's finalist Jack Jones in the opening round. I just think he comes into it with nothing to lose, because this is a warm-up for the future. So he's 28, because he's young. He's the same age as me, so that's fine. He's still young. He's 28. You're looking at a guy who maybe won't hit his peak for another 6 or 7 years. He's playing phenomenally exciting snooker at the moment. I think he's the best player on tour to watch, or certainly in the championship to watch. He'll be back on tour from next year. Everyone whose opinion you sort of respect, be that Ronnie, Steve Davis, the guys who have been there and done it, they all say he reminds them of Stephen Hendry. They all say he is the next big thing, the next like elite level talent. If they're saying that, if that's the praise you're getting from, you know, Steve Davis and Stephen Hendry and Ronnie O'Sullivan, I think you have to sit up and take a bit of notice. But it doesn't look to faze him. And I loved the way just after, I think it might have been the first session, or might be in the end actually, that he walked off and there was a camera there and he just did this little kind of like cheeky little smile down to the camera. And I thought, you know how good you are and you're playing full of confidence and you look like you're reveling in it. If there is any pressure on him, I think he's just going to revel in it. So I think Judd is the favourite. He has to be his world number 1. I don't see any reason why Zhao Juntong can't win it. And I would be delighted if he does. And hopefully I haven't put the kiss of death on him there.
The biggest surprise here is you're 28, Fraser. You don't look it.
Thank you. That is actually, I look 47. Right, well, that is all that we have got time for today. So thank you all for listening or watching this week's episode of Game On. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please don't forget to leave us a review or a comment. Make it a nice comment though. I don't want to have to go through that and read people saying nasty things about me, or people saying 28, geez, thought he was much older than that. We'll be back to do it all again next week. You can find out if I've been dropped or if Gav's been dropped. And please tune in next week. Thank you for joining us.